Hello and welcome back to Ask Caroline, my weekly live Q&A session where I answer your questions on the key topic that I have been sharing with you, discussing with you that very week, this week. This week, we have been talking about raising your profile. So I'm going to be answering your questions about that in just a few seconds. But before that, a quick introduction to who I am in case this is your first time joining us. My name is Caroline Flanagan. I'm the Babyproof coach, and it's my mission to help you lawyers out there to progress your career and start, plan, grow a family at the same time. It doesn't matter what stage in your family journey you are at. If you're hoping to have children in the future, maybe you're on maternity leave at the moment, or maybe you're already back as a working parent and enjoying the challenges that that poses every single day. Whichever stage you are at, all of the content I deliver, the services I offer are all aimed to support you in that incredible journey. Now, most people will tell you that it's not possible to have it all. Most people, when they have a family and a high flying career, the most they hope for is that they'll just muddle through, get through it, survive it without too much damage being done either to their career or without too much sacrifice on the family side. Well, I beg to differ. I think being a working parent is the most exciting opportunity for you. It is because of what it demands of you, because of what is required in order for you to make it work successfully. It is the most amazing opportunity to level up your life, to show up in a different way. It requires more of you, and as a result, I think it shows you and gives the opportunity to fulfill your potential much more successfully when you go all in on yourself, all in on believing what's possible and being willing to do the work, which is largely emotional work, but also getting down to doing the work in the background that makes that all possible. Okay, so this week, we are talking about raising your profile. Now, on the blog, I talked about the many reasons why it's so important, so helpful for you to raise your profile. And that's because it is a crowded, noisy world, isn't it? I don't need to tell you how hard it can be to get noticed by the right people, to attract the right opportunities. Now, as lawyers, especially if you are in private practice, and especially if you are a woman, not exclusively, but especially, then the temptation, the tendency is to work away in the background, to be heavily focused on the number of hours that you have to bill, which obviously is very important, but to be so focused on the daily grind of your job and doing that work that you keep your head down, that you're left in the corner, you're lost in the background. And what that can mean is that you can be working twice, 3 times as hard as someone else in the office. But if they're the ones that are in front of the clients, or they're the ones that have the relationship with the sponsor who's in a really senior position in the firm, then they are going to get so much more glory, more credit, attract more opportunities and more people than you are, because nobody really knows you're there, or if they know you're there, they observe that you're doing the work and they're grateful for that, but you're not front of mind when those opportunities come up and when those high profile people are about with their radar out looking for interesting people to sponsor, for example. So raising your profile is really important. It's about making sure that the right people know who you are and the value that you offer. Now, on the podcast this week, I took a rather deliberate angle about how you do this. There are so many different ways to raise your profile. And it can range from going to more networking events, being much more active on social media, speaking up a lot more in meetings. You know, there are so many ways. But what I did on the podcast this week was challenge you to see if you could not just raise your profile, but 10x your profile. In other words, I wanted to encourage you to make a massive wave in terms of impact. Find something, an activity that will raise your profile exponentially when you've done it, as opposed to something that you have to do repeatedly and makes a small impact. So by way of example, the social media, if you are someone who decides, right, to raise my profile, I'm going into LinkedIn, maybe you're liking some of the articles that you see on there or some of the posts. Maybe you're commenting and engaging with them, which is much more effective. I would recommend that. And maybe you're even sharing them with your community, all of which is really fantastic. But tasks like that are what I call small action. They have to be done regularly because they're so small. They require constant repetition over a long period of time in order to have a real proper effect. You know as well as I do that most stuff that goes out on social media is missed or lost in the noise. So it's really important, if you want to raise your profile there, the small action requires so much more regular and consistent effort. I like to compare it to, if you think of the world as an ocean, and any stuff you're doing on social media can seem like these tiny little ripples, tiny splashes. In an ocean of ripples and splashes, there is no reason for anyone to necessarily really notice yours. It's very, very hard unless they know what they're looking for and can find you. Now, contrast that with what I like to call massive action. That is doing a task that is going to cause, instead of a little ripple, it's going to cause a huge wave. And on the podcast, I gave you 3 examples of massive action. The first one was getting under the spotlight, putting yourself on the stage so that you're no longer the person in the audience that's maybe trying to raise your profile by raising your hand and asking a question. You are the one on stage, under the spotlight. People are asking you questions. In terms of raising your profile, that is going to 10x. It's going to produce 10 times at least the results, have 10 times the impact than if you were just sat in the audience. The second suggestion I made was that you publish. In other words, you write and create content and you publish this. This can be on social media. They have LinkedIn has a publishing platform where it does have really great reach, and that would definitely go a lot further than just sharing and engaging and liking other people's posts. So publishing your own content, but don't stop there. Why not see if you can publish in your any internal magazines or any client publications that you send out? Why not create a client publication? Why not do a client update that you write and publish and send out on the firm's behalf? Bigger still, or which will 10x your profile even more, might be trying to get an article published in one of the industry magazines or papers. So what about The Lawyer or Legal Week? Why not approach one of the editors of these legal publications and see if you can come up with something interesting that you could write about and contribute in some way? Massive impact on your profile. You'll be reaping the rewards of that like exponentially for a very long time. And then the third suggestion I made, and then we'll get right to the questions. The third suggestion I made was to enter for awards. Now, most of us, and I certainly thought this beforehand, we think that awards are just we're just plucked from obscurity by somebody up high and they will like nominate us for an award and maybe we'll win it. But that's actually not how it works. You have to apply for an award. You have to make a submission. And that's also how it works with the Oscars, by the way. We don't see all of that stuff, but in the background, there are people that are pushing that movie, pushing that actor or actress, the best supporting actor or actress, pushing them for the nomination and in order to win it. There's a massive marketing campaign behind the scenes that we don't even know about. So I want to invite you to consider consider entering yourself for some awards. Speak to your sponsor or mentor or colleague or peer that you trust about whether they think it would be, what they think would make a strong case for you, or what award they think you might be eligible for. Maybe ask your boss or your partner at the next review whether there is something in particular that you stand out for, that it's worth you pursuing getting recognition for. And keep your eye out on social media. On LinkedIn, they talk about awards all the time. So it's always interesting, I think, to have your finger on the pulse of which awards are out there, and just have your radar out for the ones that might be relevant for you. Right, so let's look at your questions then. This is a Q&A after all, but I just wanted to recap on all of the content that I shared with you and the value I shared about raising your profile. So let's get straight to the questions. Number one, and I'm reading here off the list of questions that have come up for me to answer today. Can't networking be massive action? Okay, so one of the things I said, I talked about small action, and I talked about networking as being small action. So often when you go to these networking events, you actually might speak to people you already know, in which case you're not really raising your profile, are you, at all? Or you may meet one or two new people, but usually not in a very impactful way. If I just think about the breakfast workshop event I did yesterday morning, and networking was one of the topics that came up for everybody, most people felt that frustration of going to a networking event and coming away feeling that it had been a waste of time. And that's why, in that context, networking is small action. You'd have to do an awful amount of that quality of networking in order to really raise your profile. However, networking can, to answer your question, absolutely be massive action, provided that you are strategic about it. So one of the ways in which to make it 10x your profile is to do your homework beforehand. So it's what happens before the networking event, but also what happens after the networking event that makes it have the potential to be massive action and to 10x your profile. So here's a suggestion of what you could do before the event. My suggestion is that you get a list of all of actually the first thing is probably to look at the networking opportunities that you have coming up that are in the work calendar that might be on the industry calendar. So big events, legal events or conferences that might be of relevance to you, or maybe like specialist conferences or events. Have a look and identify those which are likely to have the most high profile, interesting people there. And then once you've identified the events that are going to be interesting, I would try to get hold of the attendee list. So email the organizer, phone up, go and see the organizer and see if you can get a heads up for who's going to be at that networking event. And then what you want to do is identify specific strategic people that you are going to target at that event and make sure you get an introduction to, make sure you get on their radar, have a conversation with them. So being really strategic about who you want to meet and thinking about that ahead of time, and then during the networking event, making that your highest priority, either by confidently going and introducing yourself or by asking around and connecting with the person who can make the introduction for you if it's someone who's very high profile. The other thing to do, and this is essential after the networking event in order for it to be massive action that's going to 10x your profile, is you must absolutely follow up. I can see I went a bit out of focus then. I think Zoom and my camera get a bit confused when I get too excited with my hands. After the networking event, it's really important that you follow up. Now, if you have been networking effectively, you have done more listening than talking. And the reason why that's important is it's going to get you to a place where you start forming a relationship much more quickly. People are drawn to other people who are interested in them and willing to listen. So you need to have been listening during any interaction during the networking event. And what you have heard during those conversations is going to feed whatever it is that you need to do after that event. So if whatever bits of information that you've picked up from the strategic person that you have met at the event, you absolutely need to make sure that you follow up on that. Maybe there's an interesting article about something you were discussing that you could send on to them. Or if there's nothing really obvious that you can follow up on in terms of what you were talking about, then you absolutely must follow up with a nice to have met you email. And, any sort of reaching out to sort of seal that connection, seal the start of a new relationship. So the before action and the follow action, if you get that right, then absolutely networking can be massive action that will 10x your profile when you are targeting people who actually already have a very high profile themselves. Next, speaking. You recommend speaking as a way to 10x your profile. I am terrified of speaking. Where do I start? So this is a great question, and I am actually next week going to be focusing on sharing my experience and my tips and techniques for becoming a better public speaker. But for now, I will just say start small. The best way to become a confident public speaker is to speak. So what you want to do is to look for as many opportunities as you can to start speaking out in public. Now, when I first started speaking many years ago, I was so terrified. I used to come out with like a rash, my hands would shake at just the thought. I would just be in the audience, imagining myself on stage, and my heart would start beating and have a complete nervous stress reaction to the very idea and thought of being under the spotlight. And how I broke away from that was to start going to somewhere, start speaking in a safe environment. So I joined Toastmasters. I was living in Milan at the time, so that was really interesting. It was like a bilingual Toastmasters, part in Italian, part in English. And my Italian was okay at that stage, but it certainly wasn't brilliant. But I was able to deliver some of my talks all of my talks. I did a couple of in Italian later on, but I was able to deliver them in English. So the language wasn't a barrier, but I was very nervous. But the point of that is to say that there are places, organizations out there, or communities out there of people who are learning to speak and that want to create a safe environment for you to start testing it out, hearing how your voice sounds, working through those nerves, pushing through the discomfort of doing something that makes you very, very nervous. So look for somewhere like Toastmasters. I know they have Toastmasters in the city. I've been to a couple of them years ago where you can go along and see how it works. Highly recommend that. Another one I think is Pony Express. That's another one I know operates this safe environment, helping to nurture you as a speaker. So go out, find some support, practice, I would say, outside of the office, and practice in small ways inside the office, but don't go straight in and throw yourself in front of, your biggest client and stand on stage if nerves are a problem for you. Yeah. Next question. How do I decide what to publish? Okay. So the publishing part is, creating something yourself, writing an article and publishing that somewhere that is going to give it massive exposure. So a newspaper or a client bulletin or something. I would start, I think there's two things to start with. First of all, your intention. So what's in it for you? And this is important. Yes, you're publishing. The content isn't going to be about you. It's not you saying, oh, look at me, I'm a superstar. We want to produce content that's useful and relevant for the reader, for the other person, or people you're publishing it for. However, to inform that and to make sure that you take a strategic approach to publishing so that you also get benefit, it's really important to start with what your intention is. So what are you trying to achieve with your article, with your publication? Is it that you want to establish yourself, show yourself to be a go-to expert in a particular niche area? Or is it that you want to show your experience on a particular type of transaction? Or is it that you want to reach out to a particular type of client or attract a new type of client? All of the answers to that question, the answer to that question about what your intention is, should inform what you decide to publish. Just checking I am, getting that question right. Yes, so you're asking me what to publish. So you've worked out what your intention is, and that should feed all the way through when you're writing your article, so that you make sure you're constantly showing that without saying me and I'm great and I do all of this, because that's serving you and not serving the person you're writing for. The second question to ask to help you decide what to publish is, what do my clients, or what does my audience want to know? What are they struggling with? What do they need help with? So I would put myself in the shoes of my audience, whoever that audience might be. And maybe it's an internal publication. So maybe your audience are the partners, or certain other people in your department or in your office, or maybe you want to reach people in other offices of your firm. So what are their needs? What's missing? What are they struggling with? What's come up that's new that they need to know about? So put yourself in their shoes and imagine, if I were them, what would I love to hear more about, learn more about, know more about? What would I go out and research and find out more about, but I don't have the time? So for you, if you can create something that you could just put in front of them, saving them that time and effort, they're going to love you for that. And that's definitely going to 10x your profile. Hope that helps. Okay. Other forms of massive action. Can you give some examples? Okay, so I talked about using massive action to create a wave that's going to 10x your profile. I suggested speaking on stage, that puts you in the spotlight. I suggested publishing, we've just talked about that. And I also suggested applying for awards. What else could you do? So I think the answer, in terms of a shortcut, which is what we're talking about really, is the shortcuts that you can take that are going to raise your profile much further, much faster. One idea might be to find someone who already has a very, very high profile and basically hitch yourself to them. Not in a weird, creepy, stalky way, but find a way to get on their radar. This is something that works very, very well if you can get a sponsor who is in a powerful position. That means, and when you have a good relationship with that sponsor and they are doing their job, which is to put you in front of the right people and make sure your name is out there and that you're talked about, then really working and investing in that relationship could absolutely 10x your profile. And note there, I say working on and investing in that relationship. It's not enough to just have a sponsor. You need to be putting so much more effort into that relationship. The number of people I know who've got great sponsors, but nothing's really happening. They're not getting very much out of it. And often that's because they think it's a one-way relationship, that the sponsor is responsible for doing all of the work in that relationship to raise you up, when actually you need to be doing at least half of the work to make yourself an appealing sponsee. Is there such a thing as a sponsee? The person who is being sponsored. For you to be appealing, for you to be easy for that person to sponsor you, talk about you, put yourself in front of other people, raise your name in the right conversations, in the right room. So maybe that involves talking to your sponsor, making sure they know about all the great things that you have been doing, so they've got something to talk about. Maybe it means just really being there and having your sponsors back and really supporting them, complementing their skills in a way that they really value you and wouldn't hesitate to recommend you and talk about you, raise your profile in the right circles. So I hope that answers your question. So how are we doing for time now? Yeah, so we're just coming up towards the end. Let's see if I've got time for one more question. Let's have a look. Okay, so response to high profile events. How do I know what's a high profile event? So here's a suggestion for you. I when it comes to my networking, I go to some of the very big events. I was at an event a couple of weeks ago, an annual event held by a client, a previous client of mine. I don't work with them so much anymore, but lots of people there were also clients of mine or potential clients. So I went to this event and it was huge. There were hundreds of people in the room, and there's quite a few opportunities, especially this time of year, to go to huge events. Now, one of the things I've found is that the bigger the event, the less impact sometimes I feel I can make. I would actually much prefer to go to a smaller event, go to breakfast. I deliver a breakfast workshop once every couple of months, and it's a great opportunity to connect with people who are perhaps more senior than you, or have contacts that might be useful for you. So a networking opportunity is also great. But the smaller the event, the more chances you have of really connecting with those people who are there and forming a relationship. So in terms of finding a high profile event, what I would say is don't dismiss the smaller events, the more, the kind of more low key ones. Also, always still check who's going to be there and whether it's worth your while to be in the room, whether there's someone strategically you can form a relationship with. But notice that the smaller the room, the better your chance of making a bigger impact on the people that you meet, and of actually being able to meet everyone in the room, as opposed to when it's a huge event and you get nowhere near the those people who you want to start networking with and start building a strategic relationship with. Yeah, so don't discredit the small events. That would be my advice for that. And by the same token, I'd also say don't discount events where you think there isn't going to be anyone really high profile, or the person who you want to get in front of isn't going to be there. I always think it's really important to be open-minded when you go to a networking event. You just never know who you might come across, who you might speak to, and who they are connected to, right? So even if you find yourself struggling to get close to the person you'd spotted as being your target, still make the most of that networking event by still working your way around the room, making sure you're meeting new people and finding out about them, because you just never know who you might meet, and it could be somebody that could 10x your profile with once that, if not immediately, then perhaps going forward. Right, that's all for now. That's our half an hour up. Thank you so much for listening, watching. If you're watching this on repeat on YouTube, then thank you very much for watching. Please give me a thumbs up and do check out my website, babyproofyourlife.com. You'll see the blog, links to the podcast, and also more information if you'd like to go deeper with this, perhaps, and start working with me as part of my group coaching program on these topics. That's all from me. I wish you a beautiful day. I will speak to you very soon. Bye for now.